Good afternoon, everyone, and we're going to go ahead and start our third week for the Master and Commander series with Greg Ritscher. Thanks so much for joining us again. For those of you who missed the first 2 weeks, I just want to make a note that we do have a recording and some notes and some handouts and the presentation slides as well from the previous weeks. Those are available through our website, and also, or if you want to email me, I will send those over to you when you can catch up and see what we talked about last week. A couple of notes. Today's presentation is going to mainly focus on defining the factors in your life that are going to be helping you deal with Parkinson's disease and eventually lead you to thrive. The format for this is a little different for those of you who are new. We will be more of a conversational piece, so make sure that you have a pen and paper. Ask questions when you want. We'll make sure that those get answered. There are a couple of different ways that you can ask questions. The first is navigate over to the menu bar for GoToWebinar. There should be a drop-down menu there that has the word questions on it. Type your question there. Those will be shot directly over to me. If it's more of a technical issue, I'll go ahead and answer it right then. If not, we will wait until there's kind of a break and we'll ask the question directly, or I'll ask the question directly to Greg. The other option for asking questions, there should be a raise your hand function on your panel as well. Go ahead and shoot your hand up. We will unmute you on our end and you can ask your question verbally as well. Peppered throughout the presentation, there will be a couple of polls that ask you different questions. All you'll have to do is click on the answer on the actual screen, and those will be sent in to me, and then we can kind of share all of those answers with everybody, so everybody can, anonymously, so everyone can see where we're at as a group. There are some handouts that you can download in that control panel. Just drop down, click on the download button, and you should see those pop up in your downloads folder on your computer. A couple of things. I hope you guys enjoyed the Colorado quiz and had some fun answering or trying to answer some of these questions. As a non-Colorado native, I had some issues thinking of some, but some of them I knew, which I was pretty proud of. But we will go ahead and really quickly, we do have a couple of upcoming seminars. The final part of this series will be held next Wednesday at 2 p.m. So make sure that you're going to join us for that. We'll kind of wrap up all of the important bits, including the return on investment, which we'll see today very briefly, as well as kind of going into what's important about developing a patient-oriented plan. In addition to that, we have a webinar called Parkinson's Disease More Than Motor Symptoms that will be next Thursday, May 28th from 10 to 11 a.m. So be sure to check that out. We're adding more and more webinars every day. So if you are interested in taking and learning more, please be sure to visit our website at www.parkinsonrockies.org, and there should be some listings there for our online webinars. So let's go ahead and go over today's objectives. We're going to review a couple of the things from last week's presentation, like the goals and what makes a good goal. We will discuss the adversity quotient today, which we touched on briefly last time, and we'll get into more depth in today. And the last is starting to think about and developing those factors, the factors in your life that are helping you manage your Parkinson's, and considering the positives and negatives of those different factors. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and do a brief recap with Greg here. Sorry, navigating, making sure I have all my windows in the right order. So, okay.
Elena.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Hey, what's the Colorado State dinosaur?
I don't know. I don't know that one.
It's the Stegosaurus.
The Stegosaurus. I'm assuming they found a fossil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard of
Just thought I'd throw a quick quiz question for the moderator.
All right. Yeah. I mean, ask me another one. I might be able to get it, but
All
that
right.
that one I didn't know.
What does Colorado mean?
I don't know that one either. So I guess.
It's the color red in Spanish, and it comes from the Colorado River. In the spring, the runoff, all the red dirt makes it look like a red river. So they called it Colorado. Colorado.
There you go. I didn't know that. There we go. Now I'm learning. I'm learning even more.
There we go. We're all here to learn.
We're all here to learn. Okay, awesome. So really quick, let's do a fast recap of some of the things we discussed in the last 2 weeks, just so if we have anybody new here today, we can, and for the people who were here previously, we can get a refresher in our minds. So in your opinion, why should people do a Parkinson's life assessment, or, you know, any sort of assessment that allows them to look at their lives
Well,
holistically?
basically, I found that everybody's Parkinson's is a little bit different.
Mhm.
And so it's hard to develop, for science, to develop empirical studies in the way empirical studies are run to make sense or to give you a score or a sense of accomplishment or I'm holding my own. And so we have internal locus of controls. We're going to talk about next week the patient-oriented outcomes. We need, as Parkinson's patients, to be more involved in taking control of battling our disease. Self-efficacy is always important, and so is if you find something that makes sense. They call it a positive deviance. If you're studying, the upper quartile of people, why not study them, figure out what they're doing?
Mhm. Okay. Any, sorry, go ahead.
Well, continuing on,
Yeah.
how you do a plan is, I've tried to develop a model or an instrument, a tool that you can use that is highly flexible because everybody's Parkinson life assessment is going to look different. I'm happy to share mine so that people can kind of understand what it
Yeah.
looks like. But you start by looking at what's worked well in the past
Mhm.
and what hasn't. It's just as important to know both sides of the polarization issue.
Mhm.
Set some goals for the coming year, and goal uh, attainment is one of the real critical factors we'll talk more about today.
Right.
Um, then, once you've identified those factors, you have to weigh them, and that's like market share analysis, or how important is that particular factor to you compared to maybe some others.
Right.
Uh, and then you're looking at positives and negatives because everything has kind of a give and take.
Yep.
And then next week, we'll finish up with putting that ROI factor. Where do you get your biggest bang for your buck? And
Yeah.
whether that's your time, your money spent, the time of maybe a care partner.
Yeah.
We need to be conscious of those people as well because they perform an incredible task for those of us with Parkinson's.
Right. So what, kind of talking about what we touched on last week, what makes a good goal? What starts off a good goal?
Well, I think one of the critical parts of starting a goal is it's creating the vision. It's the driving force that brings significance into your life. The word significance is probably the critical part. Too many
Right.
people put too much emphasis on, just establishing some goal and saying, was I successful or not? Every goal that you try and work towards builds your ability to achieve goals. We have an acronym that it's called SMART. So can you take the roles that are important in your life? For example, health and wellness is important to everybody with Parkinson's.
Well,
Uh,
everybody in general, right?
yeah, absolutely. And how do you make those goals specific? You have to identify exactly what you do. You can't just say, I hope I feel better about my Parkinson's a year from now. What
Right.
does feel better about your Parkinson's mean. Fewer
Right.
medications. I got a better neurologist that I work with. I joined a support group. I wrote a book. It can be any of those things.
Right.
You have to make those specific things measurable. How are you going to measure them? Because if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And in our health and wellness idea, say you want to lose weight, okay, let's lose 20 pounds by June 15th.
Mhm.
And set a date, set a weight that you want to go at, and then work your way there. Don't just try and lose 20 pounds tomorrow.
Yeah.
Um, by doing that, you're probably going to make your goals more achievable. You have to set smaller goals along the way, milestones that you see, taking place. You
Mhm.
got to be realistic. A lot of people say, geez, I'm getting close to retirement. I need to save $1 million. Well, that doesn't leave you too many options to wait that long. So the strategies that you employ, in this case with our weight and health, diet and nutrition is important. So is exercise. It's both sides of the health issue. And
Right.
then finally, you have to set a timeline. You have to say, I'm going to get this done by this time. Maybe it's the start of pool season, so you look sharper at the pool, whatever it would be. But those elements are referred to as tactics, an individual maneuver designed to achieve an overall strategy. And so, for those of us with Parkinson's and diet and nutrition, hey, the Mediterranean diet is proven to be over and over again one of the best diets for those of us that. Always make sure that whatever you're doing, you're consulting a physician or a dietitian, and if you're doing any of those kind of things. And then figure out what you like to do to move around. Maybe it's cycling, maybe it's bicycling, maybe it's walking and hiking in the woods. It can be any number of things.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So setting smart goals and making sure that you've made them specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely are all, and also establishing different strategies and tactics to achieve those smart goals are all meant to improve the odds of accomplishing them.
Hmm. Absolutely. Because everyone has to, and this is going to be today's major point, everyone's going to face adversity. No one lives a life where everything just falls into place. And, Disney did the world a disservice when they came up with the phrase, and they lived happily ever after. Uh, I don't know anybody who's lived happily ever after. So you have to expect adversity and be prepared for it. There's two major components of that, which we'll talk more about later today. But that's your intelligent quotient, and what you know and what you're good at, and the emotional quotient. How do you relate to other people socially? Because we all need everybody around us to get through a disease like Parkinson's.
Right. Awesome. Well, so before we jump into the adversity quotient, let's go ahead and throw out our first poll for today. And so let's go. If everyone wants to navigate to their main screen, it should pop up and you go ahead and vote on the screen itself. So the question is, what is your past goal achievement fulfillment percentage? So what would you say your percentage is for achieving some of the goals that you've set for yourself in your life? So the options are 25% or less, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or more than 75% success rate. So go ahead and send in your votes, and we'll just wait a couple seconds before we show everyone. Wait a couple more seconds here. Okay. All right, so I will go ahead and share those results with everyone. So it looks like we had about 70%, 17% of you said less than 25% success rate. 33% said 25 to 50, 17 again from 50 to 75, and 33% with a more than 75% success rate. So awesome. Okay.
Looks like a good group of goal achievers there.
Yeah. I mean, I can barely even think of some goals that I've set for myself to really know. So I'm probably in that less than 25%, I would say.
Most studies that come out about goal achievement say that the majority of people achieve less than 25% of the goals of their in their lives. So we must have some sharp people here today, and hopefully they'll intercede or send in some questions or suggestions
Yeah.
for us as we go through this.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the main topic for today, which is the adversity quotient. So as you mentioned, it's the emotional quotient plus the intelligence quotient. Can you kind of, well, first of all, let's say, how does the adversity quotient fit into setting the goals? What is it and why is it important?
Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. You you have to expect that there's going to be situations coming up in life that are going to distract you or pull you away from what you're trying to accomplish. Um, the more prepared you are, the more you think about and how well you know yourself and the resources that you have, it helps you and it enables you to respond faster, better, and quicker
Mhm.
and not being prepared for it.
Yeah.
So what the adversity quotient teaches you is that there are these three parts. The first is the emotional quotient. That is things like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social skills. And I'll cover each one of them just real quickly with what are some subcomponents of that. I tell people when they ask me, to talk about an issue, I need to know where you sit more than I need to know where you stand on an issue. Where are you not going to move from? Everybody has sort of biases in this. So self-awareness is how well do you know yourself, your psychological profile? Um, do you look at things from a bright perspective? Do you tend to look at things from maybe a more pragmatic view? Do you tend to look at things from a rosy perspective? All those are nothing is right or wrong. It's just the way you're wired.
Yeah.
But you have to be aware of how you're wired. There are a number of psychological profiles, Myers-Briggs, Carlson behavioral style, the Enneagram system.
Yeah.
All of those are components that can help you kind of identify who you are.
Right.
It's one thing to be aware of what you're like, and it's another thing to be able to manage that. The
Right.
management of self comes from your self-worth, your self-confidence, self-discipline. They refer to, some psychologists call it a hardiness factor. How
Mm.
hardy are you?
Mhm.
And how well do you bounce back from setbacks? Social awareness it's one thing to be aware of yourself and manage yourself, but then how do you interact with the people around you? This is, your role one way to think about this is the role that you play in groups. So when you're introduced into a group, do you generally take the mic and stand up and start doing a song and dance? Or are you a very quiet person sitting over in the corner? Or does it depend on the group? If it's something that a topic that you're, familiar with, you might be a little more boisterous. If it's something you go, I don't know anything about this, then you go, I'm just going to sit back and listen. So that's your social awareness skills.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there can be some both positive and negative ones of that. You can be an outgoing, effervescent person, or you can be what is referred to as learned helplessness.
Mm.
If you in your life were put in situations where you deemed yourself helpless, these are the people that I use the character Eeyore in the Winnie the Pooh series. You
Yeah.
know, everything is always, oh no, this is never going to work. Something's going to go wrong. And you know what? They're right. Something's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
But just because something's going to go wrong doesn't mean you can't attack it from a positive perspective. And that's vitally important for those of us with Parkinson's to
Right.
try and stay on that bright side.
Hmm.
Finally, you have your social skills. This is how you interact with people. Can you fit in? Can you play different roles? Do you always have to be in charge or never be in charge? Or sometimes can you be either one of those? So that's your emotional quotient. Uh, your
Quick,
intelligent, okay,
quick
yeah,
question
right.
on the emotional quotient. So you touched on the people who naturally tend to maybe be Eeyores, and that probably doesn't lend itself too well to really thriving and developing a Parkinson's life assessment and really delving in. Do you have any suggestions for people who tend to be a little bit more pessimistic and in developing a more positive, optimistic outlook?
Sure. The thing that I suggest to people is and it's part of this PLA process where we're going to look at the different factors in our lives. Stop and look at what you have and stop and look at what you don't have. Those of us who live in America live like kings compared to the rest of the world.
Mhm.
We have homes, we have food, we have all these, blessings, and it's important that people try to focus more on. For example, I have a sheet of paper that I have in my bathroom, and every morning when I'm brushing my teeth and kind of clearing the fog of Parkinson's, I look at, what have I been blessed with? My family, my career. Do I have Parkinson's? Sure. Did I have prostate cancer, 3 years ago? Sure. But I don't focus on, oh, I wonder if I'm going to have more cancer later. I
Mhm.
focus on what have my grandchildren, my oldest grandson just, uh, what do they call fifth grade continuation or, graduation party.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so when you get up in the morning and you're, oh man, I'm stiff, my back hurts, and all those kind of things. Think about your fifth grade grandson graduating, and you can't believe he's, doing that. And geez, he's going to be driving a car in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it's training yourself to think about that. They're called automated reminders. Always think about the bright side. Put little smiley faces on pieces of paper in your sock drawer. And every time you open up the sock drawer, you look in there and go, hey, that's right. I got to look at things a little brighter than looking at
Yeah, little daily reminders everywhere.
it. Hmm.
Cool. All right, go ahead with the next part, the intelligent quotient.
Yeah, so now the second of the three parts is the intelligent quotient. Now, until maybe the last 10 years, this was always just called your IQ, and it was just basically your native intelligence. Uh, do you know what the Pythagorean theorem is, and can you explain it to people?
Hmm.
Um, but what psychologists are finding out more and more is that there's actually 5 different types of intelligence that go into that.
Okay.
Some people, the first one is called verbal fluency. How big is your vocabulary? How well do you comprehend what you're using in your language? Your ability to express yourself. Um, and you meet some people that are good speaking, and other people go, oh, I don't want to speak. By the way, public speaking is the number one fear in the United States. So it's not uncommon. You shouldn't feel like, oh, I just can't speak to people. A lot of people don't feel, comfortable doing that. But verbal
Yeah.
fluency is one. Quantitative reasoning. This is for our math friends, the people that can figure out a puzzle, the people that can use numbers or shapes. Have you ever met somebody that you go, how's he going to get all that stuff in that truck?
Hmm.
And somebody can just whip it
Tetris
all
it.
together and off it drives.
Yeah.
And then some of us look at stuff and go, well, I need another truck.
Mhm.
And we just don't have the capacity to think in mental maps.
Okay.
Sensory intelligence is important. This is recognizing patterns and, sensing. You meet people that are very empathetic.
Hmm.
My wife gives me a hard time. I have the empathy skills of a rock. And you go, well, I'll learn to try and think of how other people feel, but you meet some people that are just Mother Teresa's.
Yeah.
They're just the nicest person you've ever met. They seem to have that skill set to be able to do it. Then there's always the athletic component, the motor skills, people that have great eye-hand coordination. Um, they have great vestibular balance in their brain. They, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, they're just really good at hitting the ball or catching or throwing and doing that. And then finally, the last part is practical acumen. Do you have common sense? Do you know where the car's parked? I have a brother that's incredibly intelligent, has an IQ off the scale, but uh, we'll go to lunch, together and walk out, and I can see him, look around in the parking lot, and you go, Stu, where are you parked? Uh,
Yeah.
he's, it's near another car. Okay, that narrows it down. So there are some people that just are blessed with a great ability to get groups to function together in a commonsensical way.
And one person can be any sort of combination of those different factors.
Absolutely. And what makes you better at hitting a golf ball than somebody else, better at singing, better at doing math in your head? Um, it's just a gift from God.
Yeah.
We're all just wired in a certain way.
Hmm.
The last part of adversity quotient is it's called CORE. It's an acronym, and it's COORE. C stands for control. What degree do you control over the adversity in your life? When somebody tells you you have prostate cancer, I didn't do anything
Yeah.
to get that. Now, if I had lung cancer and I was a smoker all my life, somebody's going to have to pony up on that. Origin, where did this adversity come from? Is it something that was induced on us, or is it something that we might have had some, causation situation going on in our lives? Ownership. This is critical to that bright, you were talking about things we can do to improve our optimism. It's your attitude. Boy, the
Yeah.
one and only thing you control in your life is your attitude.
Hmm.
Everything else kind of happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it. We talked about that earlier with Viktor Frankl and the responsibility. R stands for reach. How far is this adversity going to reach into your life? When you have Parkinson's, it's going to reach a long way.
Yeah.
Uh, if you just got cut from the softball team, well, you can practice and maybe make the team next year.
Yeah.
And then E is endurance. How long will this last? Is this a rest of your life kind of issue, or is this something that the season will pass? For example, take a look at what's going on with COVID right now.
Yeah.
This has throttled the world, and everything is going to be new, going forward in the future. But
Hmm.
one thing to think about in the endurance is that's been going on since humans, were developed on the earth. Um, think of 9/11. Everybody that's old enough knows exactly where they were, exactly what they were doing when they first heard about the planes going into the buildings.
Right.
But an entire generation, 20 years has gone by, and now those kids grow up. If you go to the airport, man, you take your shoes off and you don't carry more than 4 ounces of liquid on the plane. That's their life. That's not different for them. And we will see the exact same thing once we find a cure for this particular disease or
Yeah.
virus.
Right. So it's these are the outside influencers. The emotional quotient and the intelligent quotients are stuff that are inside of you, and it's about an understanding of yourself and where your strengths and weaknesses are. And then the core aspects are things are looking outside of yourself.
Absolutely, and they all impact you, so you might as well take them all into consideration.
Yeah.
And again, those are some of the things that once you learn this, you become consciously competent, as we've talked about the stages of learning. Once you learn this, then things look a little brighter. When you're just inundated by something and it drops down on you, especially those of us with Parkinson's,
Yeah.
because we have our ups and downs, if you know what I mean. Uh, Sometimes it can seem like the world's just piling stuff on you, and you need to raise your hand and ask for help.
Yeah. So all of those things combined equal your adversity quotient.
Hmm.
Is there anything that you can do within yourself? Because I'm assuming most of this will be turning inwards towards that emotional intelligence quotient, because there's very little things you can do that to influence the core parts. Is there anything that you can do to build your AQ, your adversity quotient, or are you kind of stuck where you are?
No, you always have the capacity to learn and expand. Chance favors the prepared mind is a saying that is around the business world. So the first and foremost thing, again, as I mentioned earlier, is your attitude.
Yeah.
Um, your attitude plays such a huge role in the chemicals that are released in your brain, in your response, in your outlook. When things appear to be piling on, for example, in December of 2015, I through a study I was doing with Parkinson's, my PSA score skyrocketed up to almost 9.
Hmm.
And the people that I was working with in the study said, you need to go see a urologist. And sure enough, he's, oh, you have cancer. And you're like, ooh, I thought Parkinson's was fun. Let's not play with cancer. So you could let that get on top of you, or because I knew the adversity quotient, you could kind of say, well, let's see, I know I'm a determined person. I'm a goal setter. I know that, my self-management skills, I'm a fairly self-confident person. And so you can work on each of those subcomponents as you learn them and use them. And
Hmm.
that's what helps you kind of, get prepared and look at all the resources you have. Always remember, and this is especially true for those of us with Parkinson's, where we have this kind of inward look. There's a support system out there that wants to help you. There are people at par. There are people in your local community, your local church, however you live your life. There are people that are uh, anxious to help you, because, for one thing, when you help other people, when you do good things for other people, it releases serotonin in your brain, and that's one of the largest components of releasing serotonin, and that's the happy drug that makes you feel good
Right.
about the world. And so let those people help, identify who wants to help, what their motive is, and then try and eliminate as much uncertainty as you possibly can in it.
Yeah. Awesome. So once you've started to really understand where you're at with the adversity quotient, kind of learning a little bit more about your emotional intelligence, your intellectual intelligence, and preparing for those challenges that you're going to face in life, because we're all going to face some challenges. How does that translate into the Parkinson's life assessment?
Uh, Great question. You never know what's going to hit you with adversity. There's always something around the bend. There is a philosophy called the Noah's principle from the biblical story of Noah's Ark, and it says it's not your ability to predict rain that counts; it's your ability to have built an ark.
Right.
So be ready for the rain. And so what we want to be able to do is put things together in factors so that as we look at the factors in the Parkinson's life assessment, we can start to identify, hey, what seems to work for me and what doesn't work as well. And do I notice a group or cluster of in certain areas I do really well, but in other areas I maybe need a little help. And that's what we'll look at here next.
Yeah, we do have a slide here with the factors that you've put together for yourself, so people can take a look at those.
Yeah, and again, what these PLA factors, Parkinson's life assessment, for me, exercise is a good way to burn off nervous energy. The you feel good. The best drugs I take are when I work out hard.
Mm-hmm.
They're called endorphins. There's opioids. There's a number of things that science is learning that the brain kind of releases for itself. On the negative sides, sometimes, working out, you kind of go, hey, I am 64 years old. I can't run like I used to, can't jump like I used to. You have to understand that you're just getting older.
Right.
Emotional therapies, that's faith, family, mentoring.
Yeah.
I derive an awful lot from that. But there are negative sides to that as well, with stress and transitions uh,
Yeah.
from retirement. My wife's, I asked her, hey, I retired in January of 2019, and we were hiking in the woods the other day. And she said, how's retirement going for you? And I said, it seems like fine with me. I have a lot more time and energy to do things. She said, well, I asked her, how's my retirement with you? She said, well, twice as much husband, half the money. And, I think it was a joke. But so what all these different factors are, and I have 12 of them. Now, I've developed that over a series of years. I started doing this
Yeah.
back in 2016. I'm happy to share my factors with people, but again, everybody's Parkinson's is different. And so, what works for Greg doesn't necessarily work for everyone else. You have to think through what are the things that make you happy, and you notice, hey, right after that happened, I felt good. And then there
Yeah.
are other things that you go, when I see myself getting in this situation, things get bad. And
Yeah.
so there are things like exercise, nutrition, yoga, supplements, support groups, writing. I used to never be an artistic person, a creative person. I never drew. I didn't write poetry. I didn't write books. And since I've developed Parkinson's, that's become a point of self-expression and something that I've learned to enjoy. And other people, seem to get something from it, which is what really floats my boat.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of all those things that what helps you battle Parkinson's and live a life that's thriving, not just existing.
Yeah. So kind of with that, I want to send out the next poll question to everyone. So we'll go ahead and launch the poll question. And the poll question asks, what factors do you think might be most important in your battle with Parkinson's? You've got 5 different options down there: motor symptoms, control, non-motor symptoms, psychological symptoms, insurance and finances, or other. So go ahead and navigate to your screen. You can vote right there on the screen and click whatever fits your situation. Wait another 10 seconds or so and let some more answers come into the situation. Okay. All right, so I'll go ahead and close that out for you and share some of the results. It looks like 25% of you said motor symptom control was probably the biggest factor. 38% for both non-motor and psychological symptoms, which we're learning is very common in Parkinson's. So a couple questions about your factors. You said that you've developed all 12 factors over a period of time. What factors did you start with initially?
Yeah, initially it was things like exercise, nutrition. Um, Certainly my faith was a part of that,
Mhm.
and support groups, because it's really helpful for people that are suddenly a diagnosis like cancer or Parkinson's is thrust upon them to not
Yeah,
feel like you're being picked on. You're the only person that's ever had this happen to them.
right.
When you can go and talk to other people and they say, oh, well, that happened, and then this is how I handled it, suddenly that gives you a path. It gives you a light at the end of the tunnel that you can find.
Yeah.
Um, Certainly, doctors and prescriptions were on there, but in my particular case, um, they're there. They play a role, but they are not in my world. They're not the solution to me thriving. That's more up to me.
Right. And so how did you eventually start differentiating all of these different factors? Because initially you can come up with a list of things that are helping you deal with your Parkinson, but how do you rate them? How do you grade them?
Yeah, I like to use a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best,
Okay.
because it allows you to differentiate a particular factor uh, by on the order of a 20% difference.
Yeah.
So if you give something 0, that has no effect.
Yeah.
If it has a little effect, well, maybe that's 1.
Right.
If it has an occasional effect or slight improvement, okay, that's 2. Middle of the road, it's 3. If it's good to very good, then it's a 4. And if it's outstanding, it's excellent. Every time you do this, particular maneuver or tactic that you have outstanding response, well, then that gets a 5.
Did
So
you did you develop the positives and negative side of that before you graded them, just so that way you were kind of considering all of the different aspects, or did you add the positives and negatives in later?
I added the positives and negatives in later. What the first thing that I did was just make a list of all the motor issues, symptoms, then a list of all the non-motor issues and symptoms, and then the psychological ones. And in my world, there's over 55 of them
Yeah.
that I can identify. And people at home, they can find that in various books that they read or publications that the different Parkinson's associations provides. I
Mhm.
scored a 0 through 5 for every one of those. What you quickly see is clusters.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
get into certain things and you go, like, I tremor, pretty significantly. And so when it came to motor things that talked about tremor, I don't have that much stiffness and I rarely have any dyskinesia, the twitching,
Yeah.
but tremor is an issue. And so I have to, think about when you're at the restaurant eating a salad, you better not get vinegar and oil because you're going to put it on your wife. Trying to get that fork up to your mouth. My
Yeah.
wife calls it snake eating, where you hold the thing up there, and instead of bringing the fork to your mouth, you just hold your hand as still as you can and then reach out and grab it.
Okay.
Um, so that's how I originally, put everything together. go through each of those three symptom areas and then score all the different deals, you'll quickly see what your categories are that give you the tough times
Yeah.
that you're looking at. Then it's just a matter of saying, well, what do I do to combat that? How do I overcome that? How do I work around that or think through that? And that's how I developed the factors.
Okay.
Now, over time, you don't want to have 27 factors,
All right.
because then when you look at a pie chart or a bar graph, everything looks like the bicycle wheel with 1,000 little slices.
Yeah.
So what I started to do was, for example, emotional therapies. That's my faith, that's my family, and
Okay.
that's mentoring.
Hmm.
So anything that has to do with learning something and helping someone else kind of gets put in that category.
Okay.
Exercise has a lot of different components. That's things like hiking, biking, boxing, any number of things.
Yeah.
But if it has to do with physical movement, and I put that into exercise.
And the
Nutrition,
alternative therapy is similar, right?
absolutely. That's the arts, loving nature, being inspired by a sunset or a sunrise, all of those things. If I listed all of them out, there might be 32 of them, and then you couldn't, say, well, it looks like this group I need to work on. But if you kind of lump them together, then you can keep a manageable group.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, and if anybody wants to chime in, I'm curious as to what are some of the factors that other people are using, because like you said, these are the factors that you've taken into your Parkinson's life assessment and the ones that mean most to you. And I'm kind of curious if anybody wants to type in the question area or the chat box. I'd love to hear some of the other ones that potentially are the most beneficial for others. I mean, you might spark an idea in somebody else as well. So feel free to type in the questions box or in the chat, and we can kind of share with one another what are some of the factors in your life that are helping you best manage your Parkinson's. So go ahead and send those in, and we'll kind of chat while we're waiting for some of those answers to come in. So as you added all of the different all of your different factors throughout over the years, essentially, and you've combined some in order to make it less like a bicycle wheel with 1,000 spokes. What then did you do? You said you added the positives and negatives after you did all of that?
Right. What I noticed was that I, as I developed the factors, exercise, for example, um, I enjoy exercise because I control it. I make myself work out. I am in charge of Greg exercising. Uh, I also benefit from the free pharmaceuticals of your brain with endorphins, and you get that good feeling that when you've worked out. But I also noticed there were, things that you went, boy, I used to be able to, bench press this much or run this fast. I've always run the boulder with my daughters, and used to always be, oh, you got to be well under, 60 minutes, or you didn't have a good race. Now, if I finish, I
Yeah.
had a good race.
Yeah.
We're going to stop with the grandkids and do the slip and slide, and it might take us an hour and a half to get around there, but when we're done, we had a lot of fun. So those are the types of things that you have to adjust as you age and as your Parkinson's, increases or develops. And so you look at the positives and the negatives, and then the next thing is you have to give it some kind of weight. How important are all these things? Now, I, as a captain of commerce, I understood market share, and market share is a pie chart or a bar graph or something that you can visually understand. And so I tend to look at, okay, if everything I'm doing is in my life is 100% of my battle with Parkinson's,
Right.
what are the significant parts of that?
Mhm.
And so exercise, I give a weight of 14. Same thing with emotional therapies. Um, and then it just goes down from there. Nutrition, down
Right.
to doctors and pharmaceuticals, retirement. I am retired now, but I thought it would be a bigger
Bigger chunk.
influence, yeah, in my life, but I appear to be busier now. My
Someone
wife
else
mentions
says
that to
too.
me all the time. She goes, "You do more stuff now than you used to do," and that's because I was sitting in traffic, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But, so that's how that has kind of developed over time.
Yeah. Okay. And so kind of coming full circle in a way,
Hmm.
when we started the series, when we started with the PLA, it's designed to help you kind of measure all of your different symptoms, identify these different factors, set goals, and really figure out what's important and developing a patient-oriented plan. Uh, how do those, how do these factors and how does today's topic really kind of relate back to those goals? And just to reiterate almost, how does it relate
Hmm.
back to those roles and goals that we talked about in the last section?
Right. So part of the, I think it was week 2, we talked about the roles that you want to play in your life.
Right.
So you have those roles identified. Family is vitally important to me. My health is important to me. Um, all those different roles. Then from there, you're assigning specific goals that you want to try and achieve.
Right.
Um, and what you look for is how many of the influences, I almost think of it as a thread. If you take any one individual symptom of Parkinson's or an impact in your life, and you think of what do I do that helps solve that issue for me in my life, that's one thread.
Uh,
One thread by itself is easily snapped.
mhm.
When you take another factor that ties to it, and then a third one, and then a fourth one, and you start intertwining them,
Mhm.
uh, that can support tons of weight.
Yeah.
And so that's how I try and kind of look at this is you have these major roles that you've identified, and now you develop goals that you want to try and achieve or continue.
Mhm.
And then from there, you develop the strategies of, if I'm going to exercise, I better have a strategy for that. Meaning, um, do I go out and get some gym equipment and put it in the garage, which I did as soon as I saw the COVID, lockdown coming. So
Mhm.
I don't have to go to a gym like I used to. I can get just as good a workout. I don't have near the lights or the mirrors that the gym had, but at my age, I don't need that. But I can still, stay in shape and feel like I'm accomplishing things. So it's almost like taking individual tactics and weaving them together to have a thread or a cord that helps you with exercise, a thread or a cord that helps you with your emotional therapies, the emotional side of your life, the things that help you with your diet and nutrition, the things that help you with your taking medicines properly and on time, and all those kind of things. To me, that's how it all kind of weaves together. It's like you're making the tapestry of Parkinson's in your life.
Yeah. And kind of to go in with the adversity, I guess the more threads and weaves that you have, the more
Harder it is to tear.
you're more hardier, as
Yeah,
you mentioned
it makes you hardy, and it's, if you have a single piece of paper, you can tear that like it's not funny. You put it together in a phone book and try and tear that apart. Good luck with
earlier.
that. Yeah. Hmm.
Awesome. So we did have a couple of people type in, and a couple of the answers were around art, exercise, family, all in that kind of strain, and
Hmm.
like physical therapy and stuff like that. So thank you for sending those in. That's awesome. So I want to mention if everybody has questions, we're gonna kind of wrap up here now. So if you've got questions, please shoot them over in the questions drop down menu, or go ahead and raise your hand and you can ask the question directly. We can kind of go over what we're going to do next week, which will include some of a little more technical. This is your Master of Commerce bit. So
Yep.
you can probably explain it better than I can. So I'll let you
Yeah.
talk about what the return on investment, the ROI factor that you've developed is.
Yeah, that's the most recent part of what I've put together in this Parkinson's life assessment. It's one thing to identify the factors and know what they are. It's another thing to weight them.
Yeah.
But you have to, um, in management circles, it's always allocating scarce resources to maximize the return to the company.
Mm.
So no one has unlimited resources, unlimited ability to do whatever they want. Well, maybe the US government uh, in their printing money. But other than that, sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. But other than that, everybody has to allocate where are you going to spend your time? Where are you going to spend your money? What's important to you?
Mhm.
And so I developed what's called an ROI, or return on investment factor. My two rationales that I use is time and cost.
Yeah.
Uh, Clearly, I'm in the fourth quarter of my life, and I'm down to one time out.
Mhm.
So I can't restart my life over again. I've got to play out uh, my game strategy that I developed, at an earlier phase. So where I spend my time is vitally important to me.
Yeah.
Cost, when you're retired, you're retired. I have, earned X amount of money. Now I'm going to live on my investments and, slide into home, and hopefully I'll be called safe, um, to be able to do that. So next week, we're going to spend a lot more time talking about how you develop those rationale and how you put the score together. But just as a preview, you now take the weight or the market share that you assign to each of your factors, you multiply it by an ROI factor, and you will see next week that some things will rise and some things will go down. But that gives you a great view of A, how are you doing compared to in past measurement times, and
Mhm.
B, where are you getting your biggest bang for your buck?
Right. Right. Cool. And then we're also going to discuss a little bit more about the importance of a patient-oriented plan, which is kind of
Which is the whole, if you take the time and energy to put a Parkinson's life assessment goal together, it gives you the ability to kind of say, hey, am I going up? Am I holding on, going nice and flat? Or am I downhill ski racer? And if you are, then do something to stop going downhill.
yeah.
Um, so the importance of patient-oriented plans is we as Parkinson's people have to take, more control over what's going on in our lives. Again, the history of Parkinson's is that 200 years ago, a guy walking in the foggy London town noticed people shaking and shimmering and stooped over. We still don't know what causes it, and we still are nowhere close to a cure.
Mm.
I can't think of too many diseases in America where the main drug that you take, levodopa, was developed in the 60s.
Mhm.
You know, that's 60 years ago. Holy moly. So we as people in the Parkinson's community need to take a more, I believe, a more important role in developing the plans to live out our lives in a successful way. And that's the purpose of this deal. And that's why I wrote the book that I wrote.
Yeah, awesome. That was a great wrap up. And as you mentioned, you have your book out now. It's called Rising Above Parkinson's. You can get it at gregritscher.com or on Amazon. So feel free to check that out. And other than that, we didn't get any questions coming in. So if there's anything else that you'd like to say, otherwise we can sign off and say thank you.
No, hope this is helpful for people, and look forward to next week kind of wrapping everything up. People will see how it kind of fits together, and hopefully it becomes a tool they can use in their bag of tricks to battle Parkinson's.
Definitely. Awesome. So thank you so much. Again, our next and final session will be next Wednesday at the same time, 2 p.m. You should receive automatic updates for that. So feel free to join us next week for the final session. And thank you again, Greg.
Happy to help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody stay healthy and safe.
All right.
Bye.
Be safe. Bye-bye.
When was that? That was September of 2015. So at that point, you would have the job for approximately